For the first time in my life, I'm living, I'm breathing, and I'm seeing life in color.
That's an interesting comment. You're seeing life in color. Do you think
Yeah.
it was more black and white?
Oh, it was, you know what it was? It was a narrow vision that I had of everything. And when you're in survival mode, you don't take time to see that things are three-dimensional, there's colors to stuff. Life is really just transactional.
Sit your ass down. Sit your ass down. Let's talk about the suffering. It's time to start the pain. Sit your ass down. Sit your ass down and strap in. This is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt. Let's talk about the suffering. It's time to start the pain. This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
When our lives become an act for a stage play, it's difficult to know how we will be received. We put ourselves out there for the world to see, hoping that we can provoke thought, elicit emotion, and inspire. The tale we tell reveals a vulnerability that we must mentally prepare ourselves to be put on public display, giving those who normally would not have the right to comment on anybody's personal life the ability to do so. Whether it be a viewer, a listener, or a reader, the general public now has the access to perform an autopsy on our personalities. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome back our very good friend, Charlie Cifarelli, to discuss the suffering of 14th and 2nd. Charlie gives us a glimpse into his own personal life that may just help you work out some of your own problems. Charlie, welcome back to the Suffering Podcast.
I'm glad to be here with you guys.
I want to point out that this is where it all began for Charlie.
Yeah.
It really did. I got goosebumps. Yes.
We were probably one of your first podcasts, right?
Yes, you were.
And now you're like a podcast superstar.
But
now I'm busy.
But it's great to see how your story, which I always thought was a really great story, progress. And you really, it's not that you changed the story, you just gelled it better together to get the message out.
It was a lot, and I got it a little smoother.
I'm sure it was just I know you're the transactional guy. I remember that from speaking to you often, and you prepare. Like you go into these podcasts like you're a fighter training for a prize fight. Does it ever get too much where you just got to sit down and decompress a little bit?
I don't do that. You know, I really think about the listener, and I think about their gift of giving me their time to listen to me, and I owe it to them.
I said something to you, and I don't know if you remember it. You went on some show, and I said, Charlie, you got to understand something. I think it was our show. You got to understand something. However many downloads you have, people gave 1 hour per download of their time to listen to your story, and it's humbling.
It is very humbling.
Before we go any further, I want to thank Toyota of Hackensack. Toyota of Hackensack's always been very good for us. If you're looking for a car, let them find you a car. Go to toyotaofhackensack.com, and they're going to take care of you. They're going to treat you like family. So head on over there today.
Charlie, I just got to tell you, Kevin did a beautiful intro to this episode today. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was, I heard it 42 times because he kept screwing it up, but it really is a nice intro.
All right, so
I had to get that out there.
Drew, I'm going to make a humble request here. I want you to release the audio of all the mess ups and me telling Mike to go F himself and get out of here. As one time, right in the middle of it, I was getting it, and you called me and say you were downstairs. I was like, Mike, go get Charlie. It was you calling me to tell me you were some time out. Before we go any further, let's get into this week's social media question. And this social media question comes from Steven. This one was tailor-made for you, Charlie. It's, where do you get your thought-provoking comments from? We're going to hand this one off to you.
You know, it comes from two places. It comes from those that are teaching me. I have mentors, I got coaches, and it's not even in a formal sense of it. It's that the universe has given me a lot of really good people, and they ask a lot of great questions that make me think.
Now, your coaches, are they what everybody would think is a normal coach, or are they just everyday people?
They're everyday people with experience in life.
Yeah, that's the best tool ever. That's the best education ever, is the ass kicking that life gives you.
Yeah.
Right. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it comes from life lessons. Really pretty much what Charlie's saying. You learn from someone else. And you take what they're giving you and you turn that into your own.
I listen to so many different people and I steal. That's
part of it too.
We all know that we trade things. We kick the soccer ball around. One of the people who I listen to very closely is a gentleman named Adam Burt. We had him on our show. He used to play NHL hockey for 14 years. He's now the pastor at Every Nations New Jersey Church. And when he speaks, Adam steals stuff too. Okay, because I'll go to him. I say, "Hey, Adam, I stole this from you." And he goes,
for a pastor, he's a thief, is what you're saying.
He's a thief. He's a C.S. Lewis thief. But I am a thief of Pastor Adam Burt. I do want to give a shout out to Pastor Adam because he's been a great influence in my life. He's really helped me solidify some of my thought-provoking comments. And I'll listen to the guy every day. But like you, I try my best to sit and listen and absorb what people are saying because I think everybody has a valuable voice. You, Charlie, now you're somebody who lived this whole life and you've become this, I don't want to say different person. I think it's more an awakening of yourself.
The real Charlie, maybe?
Yeah, I think you're more the real Charlie now than say you were when you were in Nebraska, and I didn't even know you then.
Right.
And that's just from what you told me. Is that you think that's fair to say?
Well, I think I'm out of the survival mode. I think for the first time in my life, I'm living, I'm breathing, and I'm seeing life in color.
That's an interesting comment. You're seeing life in color. Do you think
Yeah.
it was more black and white?
Oh, it was, you know what it was? It was a narrow vision that I had of everything. And when you're in survival mode, you don't take time to see that things are three-dimensional. There's colors to stuff. Life is really just transactional, and I got away from that.
Do you think it's like releasing your suffering? Once you release your suffering, now you're living?
Let me tell you, I released a lot of suffering, and I'm definitely in a different spot than I was when I came on show number, what was it, 46?
46.
40. I actually have it written down. 46.
Yeah.
I'm just going to point it out to you. It's, we're star makers now.
Yeah.
Because you're a star now. Like you Google your name and you are everywhere. And guess what? I watch the thing. Let me let you in on a little secret, everybody. Charlie and I and Mike, we're really good friends. And I talked to Charlie.
Charlie sits on our board of directors
for a Dental Development Project. Go to denteddevelopmentproject.com. You find out more, and you'll find out more about Charlie. Charlie's been a voice of reason in there during our board meetings. He comes up with these ideas. You're like, where the hell did that come from?
That's the Nebraska in me. You take a New York guy and you stick him in the Midwest for 25 years, and you really got an interesting cat, somebody with patience that can see.
Different mindset too, and you've become a sounding board for me in much the same way Mike is a sounding board for me, where I'll call him up and I say, "Hey, I got this idea. What do you think?" And I'll call you up, after you did a show. Let's do an autopsy on that particular show. Mm-hmm. The information, how did it get out there? Did it get out there effectively? Did the message come across? Who's your sounding board?
My sounding board is, of course, Jen. My sounding board is.
By the way, you outkicked your coverage on that one, brother.
That's what I hear. I hear that a lot. Yeah, she's.
I said that. I posted that.
Yeah,
that is.
I commented on it. You
did.
outkicked your coverage.
Yes.
Yeah, she's quite a good-looking girl, both inside and out, and
she's brilliant.
She is brilliant.
She's brilliant.
That's good and bad.
We surround ourselves with these people where you're like, what the hell are you doing with me?
So I try to surround myself with ugly people.
Well,
because
you didn't.
I hang out with Kevin.
You didn't succeed. So Charlie, let's do a little recap. You were in here some time ago. I mean, this is going to be episode 83. Can you believe that? 83. Wow. So
he was at the halfway point.
You were at the halfway point. Let's give a little background on yourself. Okay. If you give a little 5-minute synopsis, so those of you who haven't seen you before on our show know a little bit more about you.
Okay, I'm a native New Yorker, born in New York City. Got a birth certificate that says that. Grew up in New York and then went out to Long Island. And it was a tough run for me. I didn't grow up in a very loving home, and I'm not unique in that situation, but my father was pretty crazy. And from the earliest age, at 8 years old, I was already in survival mode. I was getting kicked out of the house, getting kicked out at 8, getting kicked out at 12, getting kicked out at 13, and a scrapper. Basically, scrapping for food and, having to take care of myself at nighttime, in schoolyards. And it was not a good childhood. And a good childhood turned into bad teenage years. And bad teenage years led me into the wrong direction. You know, instead of following my dreams, I took the police officer exam back when I was 17 years old so I can get on the force, and I did real well with it. I started the process of getting hired, and I got away from that. Then I tried to join the U.S. Army, and I had a medical issue, not a big deal, but it was enough for them to, tell me I had to go to my primary care physician to get cleared on something. And then I wound up in the streets of East New York, Brooklyn, some of the worst areas of the country where the infamous 7-5 documentary takes place, and I wound up hooked on drugs, man. And it was bad, and I did that for a number of years, and I survived that. And, I had an awakening, got off of the drugs, never to touch drugs again, and wound up in the Midwest, and I wound up working for the Department of Corrections. And you take a street guy that gets clean, that's honest, and you put him in the Department of Corrections, I excelled.
Take a New York City street guy and put him in Nebraska Department of Corrections.
Well, I think here's what I want to say. I think the prison is prison, no matter where it is. I mean, I think that prison is prison. I mean, there's the same kind of killers they got in New York as they got in the Midwest. But I will tell you this. For me, that structure made me feel like I was in college. And I needed that. So I worked in corrections for about 10 years, and I got away from that. I just wanted to have a business, and I started a trash business from scratch, and I exceeded what I thought would happen. I thought I'd have a little side hustle, and I'd, have a truck or two.
Very few people realize that most law enforcement,
Yeah.
they always have a side hustle.
Yeah.
There's always something going on. There's electricians, there's carpenters, there's landscapers. We always try to get a little bit extra money because I think it's something.
Drug dealers.
Yeah, drug dealer. the famous Mike Dowd. But we're always trying to supplement our income, and law enforcement gets paid fairly well. Why do you think, if you were to do a deep dive into why officers do side hustles like that, because it happens a lot.
Right.
Why do you think that might be?
Because in the back of their mind, in the back of my mind, there was always anxiety working for the DOC. And I wanted to have a parachute. And so what I was doing basically was saying, this don't make sense working a second job and building this business when I could just work time and a half or work double time.
Right.
But I know in the back of my mind, I can't do this forever. I've got to basically find a way out of here. So that's what I did. That kind of work is very hard on the soul. And, that book, Failace, we talked.
Oh, that's Miracles of Manhattan by our good friend,
Wow.
Pastor Ron Lewis. It's a
Wow,
great book.
It's interesting. So that kind of work is very, very stressful on the soul. It's very hard. And, I found something to do, and it wound up exceeding my expectations. I wound up building a real live business.
Well, I've seen it go the other way in law enforcement where, like you said, they rely on overtime, they rely on road jobs, they rely on extra work within the system, and eventually that stuff dries up.
They're living beyond their means.
They're living beyond your means, right? Exactly. You've seen it time and time again. Administration cuts overtime. Well, you relied on that overtime as part of your
Sure.
income. Where you were, I know the smarter people had that side hustle for that reason. They're like, well, I'm not going to sit there and I'm not going to rely on that stuff. It's there. I'll take it if it's there. But my real stuff is going to be over here. And they also try to set themselves up for retirement.
You learn a lot about the Department of Corrections or the police department. It's interesting. When I was very gung-ho and I wanted to move up with the Department of Corrections, I was like on a slow boat to China. But once I got preoccupied, involved in my business, all of a sudden they were moving me up. It was like the opposite of what should have happened. But I really guessed that looking back is I'm an intense heat-seeking missile. And once my focus wasn't so much in moving up and it was on building a business, they kind of said, you know what, we'll give this guy a shot. And it was like actually inconvenient,
Intense heat-seeking missile, meet dirty bomb.
Yeah.
Well, I am a dirty bomb.
But that's an interesting life to go from corrections to the garbage business. Now, I know some offhanded comments because I read them where it's you went from taking care of trash to taking out the trash.
Yes.
I don't think that's necessarily true because I know you have a different compassionate outlook when it comes to corrections.
I do. I really do. And I get, every person that's locked up in America is somebody's father, brother, sister, and so on. And not everyone, I can't stress this enough, is not a triple murderer, is not a Charlie Manson. There are a lot of people that are locked up with long sentences that just did a series of stupid things and it compounded. And once you're a felon, it don't take much to keep you away.
And once you're a felon, you're always a felon because that comes with you wherever you go now.
It just goes with you, and there's no. I think more importantly, that stamp of being a felon just crushes people's aspirations.
Because they consider, I'm a felon now. I'm going to be a felon the rest of my life. Never going to be able to get a good job.
Yeah.
So they just continue with that line of work, I guess you could say.
How many times in our lives have the women in our lives blamed you for something that you didn't do, and you said, "Well, screw it. If you're going to blame me for it, I'm going to do it."
Right.
And
I can't confirm or deny.
Right. So,
Yet.
So, and the other thing is, too, if you work corrections long enough, just like a veterinarian's not petrified of a pit bull or other dogs, so they see dogs for being a dog. And if you work in that line of work, yes, there are bad people out there, and they are never to hit the streets again. But a lot of people that they're there because of their addiction. And it's not always drugs and alcohol, gambling, you name it, people get addicted to it, and they wind up going down the drain. And once they get in that drain, it seems like it's almost impossible to break out of that.
It's funny you mention addiction because I as you mentioned addiction, I stare down at this wonderful tome that you wrote. And we are here to talk about the suffering of 14th and 2nd. So 14th and 2nd is Charlie's book. Came out, about a month ago?
About a month ago.
By the time this airs, it'll be out for about 2 months. This book, I've said this, I've been plugging the hell out of this book on this show.
Thank you.
And it's not because you're my friend. I would have plugged it because you're my friend. Let me make that clear. When this first came out, I ordered it, I read it. As I read through it, I called you. I'm like, wow, Charlie, this is something special. And I would have read it no matter what.
Yeah.
But there are points in this book, and I got degrees in literature, so I'm familiar with reading books, and they're not pop-up books, Mike.
His degree is in cartoon literature.
There are very few books in this world that are able to elicit emotion out of me like this book. And there are some points that we're going to get into, some key points that I want to talk about as far as those. They really pull at your heartstrings because you have the ability when you write this to make me feel like I was with you. When your father's doing horrible things. I don't want to ruin some. We're going to get into some of it, but your father's doing horrible things, and I'm that little boy. I just implant myself into you.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. You did an unbelievable job. So yes, this book. Charlie's my friend. I want you to get the book, but as somebody here to tell you that's read thousands of books, this might be one of the best books I ever read.
That's pretty profound for you to say that. I appreciate that. And quite honestly, I'm a spiritual guy. It was like God had my hands. I wrote the book physically. I physically wrote it with a pen.
Which I agree with because pen to paper, you get a connection.
My goodness. And I got to tell you something. I went in the basement of my home in 2018. And I spent 4 months in the basement until this thing was done. And then I spent the next 3.5 or plus years slowly having it edited and gone through it 9 ways to Sunday to produce a finished product that the reader will say, you know what, I gave this person my time and this was worth my time. Because I think 14th and 2nd, if it can help you, you're going to know somebody that right next to you or one handshake away that this story can help.
There are points in this book where there are some really wicked things going on. Why write a book about your life? What drove you to get this stuff out of you?
That's a great question, Kevin. And
he comes up with them once in a while.
He does. And he does more than once in a while. I really need people to hear me on this one. So think about my life. I was always anonymous. My father always told me never to say anything, no matter what happened in the house. I went all the ways to East New York, Brooklyn, to get high on drugs so nobody in Long Island would know. I go to work for the Department of Corrections, and you're sworn to secrecy, man. You can't talk about what goes on behind those walls. You just can't. You cannot talk about it. Then I got in the trash business, another tough business that you got to keep your mouth shut. And I've always had to keep my mouth shut. And I've always been squared away. You know, I've been squared away with the great credit, not telling my story. So much so I was at a law enforcement deal with you guys, and you guys thought I was squared away because I never told anybody what happened. But at one point, I said to myself, I don't owe this to me. I owe it to other people. There are so many people that are named in this book that have helped me. You know, you're going to read about 7 incidences where a guardian angel came and he was wearing a uniform, okay? And I'm not a guy that throws bouquets at anybody, okay? I'm a guy that sees life, you know, for what it is. And I mean, I never thought of police as being spiritual. But for the reader, if they go into this book and they read the occurrences I had with police officers at times that just were not even remotely planned and unplanned, it just happened. So I wrote the book, and I decided I had some paralysis by analysis where I didn't want to let go for a while, and I finally just said, you know what, it's time to go, and I released it.